It's funny, isn't it, how often we're faced with a cheap option or a fancy one. Shall we do our shopping in Lidl or Waitrose? Are you going to buy a new sweater from John Lewis? Or sneak into Maslan and hope no one will notice? Or shall we go for a meal in that posh new restaurant in town or the local chain pub? This is a dilemma we face all the time, whether to go posh or not posh, and buying a car is no different. And today we're looking at two popular small SUVs, these two in fact. And so, coming out of the middle of Lidl, well, not quite the middle of Lidl, but the metaphorical bargain corner of the supermarket, is the Nissan Juke. The original Juke was the pioneer of small crossovers, but it was a bit cramped inside and not great to drive. Its styling was a little divisive too. This second generation model features toned down but still pleasingly wacky styling, is bigger inside and out and promises to be more refined thanks to modern underpinnings shared with the Renault Clio. Crucially, it's also a fair bit cheaper than this, the Volkswagen T-Roc, which is rather much more straight out of Surrey than straight out of Compton.
Straight out of Surrey!
And looks rather resplendent in this farrow and ball style shade of blue. And Volkswagen was a little bit slow to get going with small crossovers. This came out in 2017, and then a smaller but chunkier T-Cross came out in 2018, and the equally small but swoopier Tego came out in 2021. So Volkswagen now has plenty of small crossovers to sell you. How nice of them. Still, it's the T-Roc that's the most popular choice. It's based on Volkswagen Golf underpinnings rather than the smaller Polos, and its engines, build quality and overall driving experience ought to be more sophisticated than those of the Juke. And actually, a T-Roc like this is a fair bit more expensive. It'll set you back around £22,000 for a 3-year-old one, whereas a Juke of a similar age is likely to be less than £14,000. So is the Nissan Juke the bold bargain of the day, or does the T-Roc provide enough suave sophistication to justify its extra price? We'll find out in a second, but before we do, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you to like and subscribe to the Motorpoint YouTube channel. And while you're there, click on the bell icon so that you catch all of our latest reviews. There are full in-depth reviews of both the T-Roc and the Juke and other car content as well. And I'm sure Tim, Motorpoint's content boss, will be very happy to link to those because he presented them. But back to the task in hand, the T-Roc comes with a variety of engines and trims, some of which are available with four-wheel drive. There's a choice of a peppy 1-litre petrol, a smooth and powerful 1.5 turbo petrol, and a punchy yet economical 2-litre turbo diesel, which is what this car is fitted with. There's also a powerful 300 horsepower R version, but no electric or hybrid alternative. The Juke, however, is available with a hybrid, but that was only released in 2022. What's more common is the 1-litre turbocharged petrol, which is in this car. The interior was a real weak spot in pre-2019 Jukes. It felt cramped, cluttered, and cheaply put together. Well, this Juke is none of those things. There's plenty of room and a lot of adjustments so you can find a comfortable driving position. And there's also lots of storage. It also looks, well, a bit busy, but if you're being kind, you could call it eye-catching. More plus points are the physical dials for the climate controls and volume and tuning knobs for the stereo, but there are issues. This touchscreen isn't the clearest, nor is it that easy to use. And while there are some premium finishes here and there, for example, there's this faux leather dashboard, it doesn't take too much prodding around before you find some hard, scratchy plastic. At least equipment levels are generous. You get LED headlights, cruise control and lane keep assist on all models, though the most basic trim levels don't get a touchscreen, and you have to head to the higher end trim levels to get goodies such as digital climate control and built-in sat-nav. Mind you, as long as you've got a touchscreen, you will have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and such well-specified models like this N connector are easy to find. So what about the Volkswagen then? Well, if I was reviewing a pre-facelift car, I might be telling you about some very un-Volkswagen-like hard, scratchy plastics. This car, though, was built after the model got a bit of a facelift in 2022, and some of the biggest changes are inside. Gone is the old slab of dashboard, replaced by a more slimline setup with a clear, reasonably intuitive touchscreen. It isn't the best in the business, this infotainment system, but it's reasonably logical to use and is much slicker than the Nissan system. Like the Juke, you also get a physical volume control dial and separate climate control buttons, which are actually sliders. And in some other Volkswagen models, they are not backlit, which is a little bit tricky to operate at night. But in this car, they are. Although they're still not quite as easy to use as the conventional setup in the Juke. That said, you do get dual zone climate control as standard. Elsewhere in here, the T-Roc attempts to justify its higher price tag with a fully digital instrument cluster, adaptive cruise control in style trim, and in this R-Line model, some sporty looking seats that, as well as offering this rather natty pattern for your appreciation, also actually deliver in terms of comfort and support. In the back seats, the T-Roc benefits from its close family ties with the spacious Golf hatchback. But because it's better packaged, it is even more roomy. I'm 5'4½", so leg room, knee room, headroom is plentiful. But even our very own Tim Rodey, who is somewhat taller, fits. There's also a pair of your very own air vents here and a pair of USB sockets to keep your devices fully charged. And when you reach your journey's end, these doors open really wide, which is great to access child seats and also for people who have mobility issues. The rear doors of the Juke are not quite so accommodating. For starters, you've got this funny looking door handle here, which is kind of cool, but a little bit awkward to use. And then there's the sloping roof line. Now, if you're tall, you might accidentally knock your head on it. I don't have that problem. I wonder how Tim got on with that.
I've hit my head on that already though.
And how he found the space inside. He's 6'3". Yeah, little bit awkward. Myself, however, I'm feeling okay, and I can forgive this car because it is a smaller car than the T-Roc, so that does mean fundamentally there's going to be a little bit less space. What is less forgivable, however, are the lack of air vents, and there is only one USB socket. Boot space was another weakness of the old Jukes, but with 422 litres of room to play with, or 1,300 with the seats folded down, it's actually pretty decent in the newer car. The only problem is, to get that maximum volume, is you need to deal with this large load lip, which is a little bit awkward when you're loading heavy items in and out. So to get rid of it, you can move this boot floor, and then you get a little secret storage compartment under there, but then you lose some boot capacity and then it's a much, much smaller space. The T-Roc, however, has a much larger square luggage area, which is noticeably bigger than the Juke's. Check this out. The T-Roc can take up to 445 litres of stuff, though when you fold the seats down, it actually evens out with the Juke, giving the same 1,300 litres of usable space. So the T-Roc just about has the edge when it comes to practicality. But what about how they drive? And also, how about shutting this boot when you're only 5'4½"? I'm right on tippy toes there. Anyway, let's start with the Volkswagen, shall we? The first thing you notice out on the road in the T-Roc is how grown up it feels. And there's very little road and wind noise, even at motorway speeds. Overall, it feels solid and stable, all very Volkswagen. That doesn't make the T-Roc dull, however, far from it in fact, because there's not very much body roll, there's plenty of grip and confidence-inspiring brakes, making it a rather enjoyable car on a twisty country road. And with this 150 horsepower 2-litre turbo diesel coupled to a 6-speed manual gearbox, it's got plenty of punch. Although from our experience, the smooth spinning 1.5-litre turbocharged petrol is more satisfying and sophisticated. That said, the diesel version can accelerate to 62 miles per hour in under 9 seconds, and the naturally more punchy nature of the turbo diesel engine makes overtaking feel surprisingly effortless. Fuel efficiency is equally impressive. You should get 50 miles per gallon from the diesel, and even the two petrols can start with a 5 if you drive them sensibly. Switching to the Juke, and in this instance, it would be easy to feel a little shortchanged when it comes to performance. I've just stepped out of a car that has a muscular 2-litre turbo diesel engine, but actually this 1-litre is perfectly acceptable. It is a willing engine. And with a 0 to 62 miles per hour time of just over 10 seconds, it's comparable in performance with the 1-litre version of the T-Roc. It's also comparable in terms of fuel economy, as you should get around 48 miles per gallon from it. Not as impressive as the diesel T-Roc, but pretty much what one expects from this type of car. When it comes to handling, the Juke's Renault Clio underpinnings definitely do it favours. It's clear that the car's engineers have placed an emphasis on making the Juke feel agile and moderately sporty. It's perhaps not quite as much fun as a Ford Puma, but it will put a smile on your face as much as the T-Roc. Where the Volkswagen has the edge again is in ride quality. The Juke simply feels a little more firm and fidgety. We suspect that over the course of a long drive, you'll feel much less tired driving the T-Roc than you will driving the Juke. So where does that leave us with the question that we asked right at the beginning of this review? Is the Juke good value for money, or does that cheaper price tag also mean a cut in quality? Now, the T-Roc is larger, more comfortable, and does feel like a more premium product, whereas the Juke is almost as good to drive, is broadly as economical, and is a lot cheaper to buy in the first place. So it depends really on what your priorities are. If you like the qualities of the Volkswagen and you like the Volkswagen badge, then it's worth spending that money. However, if you want to save a bit of money and spend a little less, then the Juke is still a very fine choice.